Welcome back to another episode and conversation here on the Worthy for 30 podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tash. With me today is Cate Luzio, the founder of Luminary. Excited to have you here, Cate.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
You built one of the most dynamic, inclusive communities for women. Just for the listeners who who have listened or will listen to the conversation I had with Melissa and Katie from Fierce Foundry, they recommended and they referred me and connected me with Cate. So I'm very appreciative. Worthy for 30. Again, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I have a wife. One day my 9-year-old daughter will also be entering the workforce. So I definitely want to use this time as here are some examples of some aspirational figures. Looking back on this time, as I'm speaking with Cate and Melissa and Katie, amongst others. So yes, you've built this dynamic, inclusive community, roughly started in earnest about almost 8 years ago. You spent 20 years in banking. It's funny, I was listening to your conversation with Andy Dunn.
Yeah.
During one of your stops at JP Morgan, you had an opportunity to meet Jamie Dimon. So maybe we'll get into that later. But would love for you to, again, the premises of Worthy for 30 is doing good while doing well. You're an incredibly ambitious person, listening to Andy Dunn amongst other conversations, again, connected through, other guests. Would love for you to bring us back to that 8 years ago. Again, you were in senior level positions in banking, first stop HSBC, then JP Morgan. Would love to understand what was going through your head at that time before you started to put pen to paper for your business plan.
Yeah, I'll do a little in reverse. So I actually my last stop was HSBC.
Okay.
My first stop really in earnest was Bank of America. I spent many years there, then was recruited at JP Morgan, spent 7 years there, then was recruited to HSBC. And I tell everyone this is a big part of my story. I loved what I was doing in finance. I really loved the impact that I was having from a client standpoint. I had my last role, I had thousands of people around the world. It was a global role, and I loved that. But I also had the opportunity, in particular, at JP Morgan and then later at HSBC, to get very involved in our various ERGs, our employee resource groups, in particular our women's network, but also in talent pipeline and talent development. And that's where I was finding myself kind of leaning so heavily in any of my free time, was mentoring others. And I think that's really important. And bringing together people. You would now call that bringing together community. I don't think that community was, as a word, especially inside companies, was as big of a buzzword as it is now. So all of the early signs of how I brought people together, whether it was clients, whether it was internal, whether it was both, that was all there. And then in 2000, and had a really pivotal conversation with a mentor of mine from finance who had spent many years at JP Morgan, certainly while I was there. And he challenged me around, what did I want to do when I grow up, right? After, almost 20 years in doing this, what did I want to do? What did I want to continue to do? And what was driving me? What was challenging me? And I really had never thought about that. I mean, of course, I was challenged every day in my job and people and clients, but it took him sort of having that conversation with me to take a step back and say, okay, what do I want to do? I'm in my 40s at that point, and I decided that maybe now was the time to take a step back and really figure that out. 3 things that he said to me was, what's the worst that can happen if you do make that decision or decide to do something completely different? 2, you always have your reputation, your relationships, your resume that you can lean back on. And 3, if you do decide to do something else, you're going to learn a hell of a lot in the process that you can apply if you ever want to come back. And those were really things I'd never thought about for my own self. I probably had given that advice to others. And so with that, I took the jump. And then probably about 6 to 8 weeks later, I really wrote the business plan for Luminary. And 8 months after that, we launched. So we'll turn 7 as a business, meaning that we were physically open and the business was launched at the end of this year.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. So 7 years as the business, 8 years in
Yes.
inception, okay. Excellent. Before we get into Luminary and like breaking down the components of the business, because there's, people think, okay, you have a shared workspace, is that just what it is? It's just, I go to 28th Street and I go into an office and I have a cube mate, I may not, I might have a private office. It operates like a WeWork, but there's a lot more to that, which I definitely want. But what's super interesting, also going back to that conversation with Andy Dunn, and one of my favorite exercises I like to do with guests is connecting the dots.
Mm.
And what's super interesting listening to that conversation is when you were in high school, you started the girls' soccer team.
Yes.
In high school, because there wasn't a girls' soccer team at your high
Right.
school.
And I wasn't allowed to play on the boys' team.
And you were not allowed to play with the boys' team, right? So, do you think that that conversation you had with your mentor to actually starting Luminary was connected to that experience growing up?
I think looking back now, there are so many connections. I mean, my father I have two brothers, put all three of us into sports like as soon as we could be in sports. And I think he did that, one, because it would occupy our time. But two, he did that, and I know this, that he did that because it was, you got to learn to work as a team. You got to learn to stand on your own. You have to learn, what's the difference between, going through a win and going through a loss, leadership, all of those things. I think, especially in sports, help me to be a better leader in school and be a better actually academically, which then led to, okay, we've got no team in high school. I'm not allowed to play on the boys team. I'd only ever played on boys teams prior to that. And that was a huge barrier. And my dad just was like, so go do something about it. You know how to do this. You've been a leader already on the teams that you've been on. And so, you know, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. And I think I kind of approach so much of my life professionally. What's the worst that can happen? I'm going to take the jump. And if it doesn't work out, I've learned a lot in the process. And it took that mentor of mine, not 8 years ago, kind of reiterating that to me to say, oh yeah, actually I could do something different. And I always say this, the other thing I always say, Eric, is like, you never say never. Like, I think eventually I'll go back to corporate at some point and use what I've learned for however many years I end up staying an entrepreneur, back into to something much more structured like corporate America. But we'll see.
We'll see. I know it's 8+. There's a plus
Yes.
at the end of how long Luminary's been in existence. So yes, what's the worst that can happen? I can always go back. They can. If I don't ask, the answer will always be no, and then you're kicking yourself. So getting into the philosophicals of being an entrepreneur, again, your dad, posed a question like, why don't you start a team? You can't play on the boys team. Why don't you start a girls soccer team, right? When it comes to entrepreneurship, is it nature versus nurture? Is it based on my circumstance and my innate ability I can become an entrepreneur? Or are there those elements, or having that tutelage, from your father or from a mentor, that can help push you into entrepreneurship?
Well, I can tell you, until I literally the night that I started writing the business plan, if you had asked me the week before, and someone said, hey, Cate, why don't you go run your own business or start a company? I would have laughed and said, are you kidding me? That's not what I want to do. That's not for me. And it wasn't because I couldn't do anything and I couldn't start something. I had done that for lots of different organizations and companies. I just never thought that was my part of my plan or my path. And then once I sat down and started writing, and that I had this idea that ended up turning into a business plan, because I had all the tools from all of my experience, like writing strategic plans for the companies that I work for and the banks that I work for. It was just getting it down on paper and then saying, wow, this is something. But I don't think it was someday I will build a business for myself. I just never had that. And I have a younger brother who's an entrepreneur, an older brother who's pretty much an entrepreneur for someone else, but he runs the business. It just wasn't, I like structure. I'm a structure person. That's why I like team sports and coaches.
Yeah.
But I think when I did write it out, it's like, well, I can do this. I have a lot of years of experience. I have a great network. Again, I have these wonderful relationships. I have all these skills. Why not me? And I think that's the whole point, that that mentor, without even thinking about that I was going to go start my own company, it was like, well, why couldn't you do something different? And this just happens to be the something different.
Yeah, well, why not me? I can do this. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's like, why not me? What's the worst that can happen? And again, turning into reality. I think that's the other thing with entrepreneurs is, there are a lot of idea people, but there are not a lot of people who execute and see that idea through. And it's also interesting too. It's like, am I an entrepreneur? I wouldn't really consider myself an entrepreneur. And I go back to Atomic Habits with James Clear, and he said, if you're trying to stop smoking, and there are two people, okay, two people are trying to quit smoking. One is asked, hey, do you want a cigarette? And the guy goes, no, I'm trying to cut back. And the next guy is offered a cigarette, and he goes, no, I'm a non-smoker. I don't smoke. So it's like the mindset, right? It's like, I'm not an entrepreneur, but hey, maybe I am an entrepreneur. Maybe if I start calling myself an entrepreneur and really grasp the concept of what it means to be an entrepreneur, at least in Cate's definition, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I also had the opportunity, I think, in the jobs that I had, even at these large financial institutions, to be very intrapreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really a word that I sort of gravitated towards during my life and more of that corporate America. Entrepreneur, you don't really talk about it, but that is what I was doing. I was helping build or rebuild businesses inside these big companies. And so all I needed was a plan, and then I could go execute. In this case, I built the plan and I had to go execute. And then I built a team around me that I knew could help me execute versus doing it all on my own.
Gotcha. So how do you define, for the people who've heard the term entrepreneur, what does that mean? Like, how would you define it?
So I think it's have the opportunity, whether your company is giving you the opportunity or not, to create, to innovate, to come up with new ideas, even whether it's new businesses, new products, new ways of working, new processes. Most people just follow the process or follow the policy. If you are out there going, wait a second, I've got a whole new way to think about this, or I gravitate towards problems and I want to solve those, or I've got all these new things that I want to try. I mean, I think that's a great definition of being intrapreneurial, right? And allowing others to participate and bringing that ability to be creative in a very structured environment. I was fortunate in the many of the roles that I played or that I had. Most of the time I had great bosses that would allow me that opportunity to be creative. But not every job's going to be that, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you've also got to invest in it, and I think that's where a lot of challenge comes out of jobs. If I'm bored in a job, I can't do it. I just can't do it. So I got to be challenged, and I think every time I got a little bit sort of like I could kind of do this in my sleep, that's when I would start looking for the next thing, because I need that challenge and I need to have impact. And I think that's, I was having impact in a big company, but in a minor way, in my view. Now I'm in a small company having a big impact in a different way.
Yes, definitely a huge impact, and we'll get into that in a second. But is there a time, Bank of America, JP Morgan, HSBC, that really stood out to you as like, this is when Cate really was the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, at JP Morgan, I had the opportunity to really almost build a business or rebuild a business from the ground up. We were at the time, this is 2010, 11, they were really expanding their corporate bank across the globe and continue to invest now. But they did not really have a multinational coverage model where I was based in London, and we had this huge region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. How do you cover all the subsidiaries of all these big companies at the headquarter level? And so I was tasked with building that business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That was something I had never done. So talk about being an entrepreneur inside a company. That was entrepreneurial, and learning how to work with different stakeholders and what you needed. And then when I got to, one of the reasons I was recruited and wanted to go to HSBC is I'd been doing that for 5+ years at JP Morgan. HSBC had not built this model, or it wasn't industrialized, and they were trying to do it at a much bigger scale and many more clients and many more people. And so that was, again, the opportunity to build the business in a different way, with being much more creative in how we leveraged people and talk to clients. And I think we call them at the time these corridors of trade, and how do you maximize and leverage those. So that to me was like, okay, I'm starting a business inside of a business. I just happen with that have millions of dollars of funding and resources and people, but it's still hard, even when you have that, because you got to navigate through all the bureaucracy and the corporate stuff. But I took all of that and said, if I can do it inside a big company and I can gather people and I can sort of corral them to get to here's point A, we got to get to point C and we got to do it faster. That's a lot of what I took in leaving and starting the business.
Excellent. So starting the business, let's get to the Luminary. So again, I mentioned office space. It's a lot more than that. How would you boil it down? What would your elevator pitch be for someone who's interested in joining Luminary?
So our physical location in New York is literally just a vehicle of connection and procuring our content and all of our events. And back in 2019, when we launched, it was the only way you could connect and access our content in our community in person in New York. Fast forward a year, pandemic hit, we went online overnight, and it was not even something I'd ever was even considering digitally. It was all about physical in real life, because before the pandemic, that was what everyone was used to.
Mm-hmm.
And in literally that moment of we're eventually going to have to shut down, we were watching it happen in coming across the globe, and we said, well, we have all these great events, we've got to go online because we want to be able to be there for people. It'll only be a few weeks, maybe a month or so, and here we are, right, 5 years later, if not more, and that was the game changer for us. We started as a physical space. We still have this physical space. It's about 25,000 square feet in New York.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time we built the physical space, it's still, yes, come to events, yes, co-work. We have some private offices, but it was never designed to be a traditional co-working space. There are enough of those, and there are plenty within a stone's throw of where Luminary is in Nomad. But what we also saw was all of these spaces being built around the country that were either founded by women or underrepresented founders. And so I started reaching out to them as well and say, I'm not coming to your city to build a physical Luminary. Let's collaborate, let's partner. So we now have this great partner network of over almost 50 spaces around the globe that our members have access to. But at the heart of everything we do is our programming and our content. And so we're facilitating and hosting about 20 events, programs, workshops every single month. Some of those in person, some of those hybrid, and some of those 100% virtual. So it just depends on the session or the event. And we have two very distinct audiences. We have our B2C community, which are individual members. They pay for their membership. About 60% of those members identify as business owner, entrepreneur. And then on a B2B side, we do a lot internally with companies around professional development, workplace engagement, as well as then working with companies on brand and content, in particular as it relates to small business owners and consumers. Always by design, Eric. My original business plan always had a B2B and a B2C focus. It just happened to be in one location, and now we've got members in more than 30 countries around the world.
Wow, that's incredible. So again, for the folks who are listening or who will be listening, I'll include links to learn about these different ways to become a member of Luminary. It's an incredible community, it's a vibrant community, and I imagine over time as you scale Luminary, there's going to be more content, more events, both hybrid or in person, or 100% digital.
Yeah, I think right now, and I could be getting the numbers a little bit off, but 60% of all of our programming is 100% virtual. And then any of the programming about 95% of the program that we actually lead physically in New York is also live streamed. So you can zoom in, whether it's one of our larger summits, whether it's a workshop. And then we also have our Luminary live experience, which is where we pop up for a couple of days in multiple cities around the country. We just got back from Dallas. We're in DC in 2 weeks, and that is giving the full in real life Luminary experience in different cities. And we usually host at least one or two of those events in our partner spaces. So we're investing in that ecosystem and bringing people into those spaces as well.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And we'll get into events in a second, but going back to the business plan, again, for the folks who are listening, who are coming from, again, they have a stable job, maybe they've had a conversation with a mentor, or maybe again an idea just popped into their head. Looking back, the 8, 9 years, when you put pen to paper, what would you consider the mandatories? Again, if you're writing a business plan today, what should that aspiring business owner write down?
Well, I have a whole workshop that I teach that twice a month, called our Business Plan Boot Camp. But so I think number one is what is the opportunity? A lot of people go, I have this great idea. Well, that's great. An idea is great. How many customers can you attract with that idea, right? So what's the market? Not the market size. I never think about like, is it a $10 billion market? It's a billion. No, what's the market that you're going after? To what problem are you solving by going after that market, and or what's the opportunity? You don't have to, everyone doesn't have to be solving world peace or some big problem. It could be just, I want to put a great product or a service out there. The biggest thing I think every business owner needs to have is a fundamental understanding of their financials. Your financials are your key to success.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to build the business? How are you going to fund the business? When are you going to generate revenue? When are you going to break even? When are you going to become profitable? If you have to raise money, how much, what are you giving away for that? If you're going to raise money, how much do you need to raise? Why do you need it? How are you going to deploy it? Because lots of business owners will say, well, I can't fund it myself. I have to raise. Well, I don't know about you, but if somebody asks me for money, I'm going to want to know what's it for? How are you going to use it, and when am I going to get paid back? So, you got to ask these questions of the business itself. And then what's your version of success? Is it just about customer acquisition? Is it about revenue? Do you eventually want to sell the business? So we have, and I teach this, as I said, every month, a business plan boot camp that really asks those fundamental questions to get business owners in the right mindset to really knuckle down and write a business plan that can be their North Star and their guide for running their business.
So it's, again, understanding the numbers, the metrics, what does success look like? It's interesting, I usually get a little, I wouldn't say frustrated, but anytime I watch Shark Tank and you see someone pitch and they don't know their numbers, and like Mark Cuban immediately jumps on them, like,
every time.
Yeah.
Every time. Or they'll say it's a $10 billion market. Okay, that's great. But how are you going to attract any of that market, right? You don't have any marketing, you have no advertising, you don't know social media. So these are all the things, these are the fundamentals of running a business. And number one, you also have to know, who are your competitors? I think I hear a lot from business owners going, well, I don't have any real competitors. Okay, you do. Everybody has a competitor. And if you truly don't, and you have the best product or service in whatever you're doing, if you don't have them now, you will have them. Because if it's that good, you will have a copycat pretty quickly. And so, you have to ask these questions. And if you can't write a business plan, my number one recommendation is to do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the business. Because right there on a one pager, you're going to see the headwinds coming at you and the potential tailwinds of the momentum of the business. I think a lot of people are scared to do that. But if you want to build something that's sustainable, profitable, that you want to really potentially scale, then you really need those fundamentals. By the way, if you're a solopreneur and it's just you and you've got a great business and you're making the money that you want, there is no harm in that. But I always like to encourage business owners to think bigger.
Think bigger, right? Being small is canceled. You gotta think bigger and grandiose. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned competition, right? And earlier you mentioned collaboration with other spaces. Could you put your finger on a Luminary competitor, or are you trying, or is the aspiration to say, yes, so and so have a complementary offering? How do we partner? Is that the objective?
I think that is, for what we do, there's always a spirit of, there's probably a way to collaborate or partner here. And by the way, it's hard. I think people throw that word around, partnership, let's partner or collaborate. And then you got to actually do the work to partner. What's the win-win for everybody? In our space, we have a lot, what I would call peers. And I think that what's really nice, especially for what we do, and we've always been gender inclusive, but obviously given who I am, we have a lot of women. There are so many people to serve in this world, right? And so I think there's always if there's a will, there's a way to kind of figure out that partnership aspect. For example, in New York, I said earlier, the stone's throw away, there's many co-working spaces. Literally right next door is a co-working space. I know the owner, it's great. We'd love to collaborate. All of these spaces that we partner with around the country and abroad, I'm very clear with, even if I were to come to your city with a Luminary, and I'm not, that's not my plan, but we'll have a conversation. We partner with other just digital communities. And I think because 1+1 can equal 4 if you can figure out how everybody wins. But we absolutely have competitors. I just choose to say, okay, is there a way forward? Can we work together? There are more than enough people to serve that need our services. And by the way, Luminary can't serve every single person, nor should we.
Yeah, no, it's I love it. It's life is abundant, right?
Yeah,
Plenty,
exactly.
there's plenty of space for everyone. And you mentioned success, and how do you define success, especially for that aspiring entrepreneur? How do you Kate, define success for Luminary?
For Luminary, obviously it is all about impact. It's about engagement, and it's not just about the number of members. That's certainly a metric because that equals financials. I think it's how many more companies can we serve and their employees, how many more individuals, how many more business owners can we touch and provide the tools and resources for them to stay in business, to connect them to other businesses, to connect them to customers. Outside of the financials, we really look at impact as how much more impact can we have. And for me, I want to work with hundreds of companies. I want to work with thousands more individuals. So that's going to always drive me because that impact is sort of the headline. And how do I keep creating impact? I think success is changes can change on almost on a daily basis. And I wouldn't have said that 8 years ago in my former life. I think I had a version of success, and that's what was driving me. And a lot of that was financial because of what I did as a banker. There's certainly that aspect in what I do now, but I think I'm able to say, okay, today I had a great meeting with a wonderful enterprise client, and they're seeing the value and they want to renew. That's a success. Or that member that walks up to me and says, hey, Kate, I came to that one event and you connected me to this person, and now that's my co-founder. To me, a success. Or someone comes and says, I was, navigating a big career change and I came to one of your events and I just needed community in that moment. That's another kind of W, right? And one of the things that I learned growing up, I said it earlier about my dad, is a win is a win, no matter how small. You got to take the small W's as well as the big W's. And so I think that is a big thing that I have had to grapple with as an entrepreneur, that not every win is going to be giant. Not every swing is going to be massive. It's a culmination of all of these smaller wins that lead into something bigger.
Yeah, no, that's very very impactful, very profound. Because I imagine, again, as you look back on the 7 years in business, 8 years again in formation and inception, I imagine again you do have those verbatims, right, from members, whether it's enterprise or it's that one person who came to an event and like, thank you, Kate, thank you, Luminary. The other thing that's interesting is that you want to impact hundreds more enterprise clients, thousands more individuals, but you're one person, Kate. So how do you scale yourself?
Well, I have a great team.
You do have a great team,
Yeah,
yes.
I have a great team, and I think um, from the very beginning, I knew that I needed a team around me that understood the mission and the vision, but that also had skills that I don't have. And I think we've built a great team that have a lot of skills that I don't have, probably I wouldn't be good at anyway, even if I tried. Marketing is a great example. But I think I have a very unique ability to remember people. I did that in my former life. I have a fabulous memory. And so if I meet somebody in our physical space, or it's in Dallas or at an event,
Hmm.
the likelihood that I'll remember you is pretty good. And I was able to do that in my former life as a banker. I had thousands of people. People would say, I think they would say, if they met me or didn't meet me, they would say, well, Kate knows everybody. I don't really. But if you're on a Zoom with me, I'm very good at like picking up on people. So it's not about me being everywhere all at once. It's all of those, again, those moments that lead up. But my memory is quite good. And I think one of my superpowers is just this ability to catalog it and go back to it and capitalize on it.
No, yes, you do. I think you described it as having a photographic memory, but not having like as close
Oh
to a
no,
photograph.
yeah, as close as I could without being categorized as like a doctor said I have it. It's pretty good. My A lot of my friends and family will say, "Yeah, can you use it for good, not evil?" I can remember those comments. Go, wait a second, this is what you said 9 years
Yes.
ago. Uh, but I think for me in my former life and the people that I managed, and I would say now is that I use that, and that's I'm very fortunate to have.
You know what's interesting is that, I've also heard with entrepreneurs, especially the ones that are, understand their weaknesses and their strengths, to make their A's A pluses and delegate the C's and the B minuses. So you mentioned marketing, right, as one of those areas where you're like, okay, I'll have somebody else. But what was that A that you turned into an A plus?
So I'm a salesperson. I mean, I was a salesperson my whole career. Most of it was client facing. So
Mm-hmm.
where do I leverage those sales skills is with our B2B. I mean, and also my background. It lends itself into sitting in front of the people that I feel like I was in their shoes potentially at one time. So I really, that's where my ability is, my strengths are great. So like I want to keep playing to those strengths. I think people leadership, investing in talent, identifying in people where they don't see the skills or where they don't see the path, and kind of creating roles for them. I think that's just like so natural for me. So I play to that. And a lot of our team would say they're in jobs that they didn't even think they were qualified for.
Mm-hmm.
But really identifying those, hey, I think you've got these things. I think they could really play to this kind of role. Some of it's the taking a leap of faith, and some of it's like, okay, let's do this. I think execution, I am an executor. I just, if I've got a plan, we're going to make it work. And I think, like I said, I hire people around me that I think are going to not only help me build, but they're also going to challenge me and debate decisions and push back. We all need that. And I am a huge believer in the founder, especially, or the leader, shouldn't be the only one with ideas. It should be, for at least for me, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
let's bring in everything and let's see what's the right opportunities. So everyone and my team knows, bring me ideas, debate me, push back. My way isn't always the right way.
Gotcha. Can you give an example of where that really made an impact, where you tried to you encourage an idea, and that idea that came from somewhere else, or that came from
Yeah.
you that was challenged? Yeah.
Simple, very small one. This was in the pandemic, and I am a Gen Xer, so I love email. And a lot of my team, millennials, now Gen Z, and we had a communication workshop that we did amongst the team. We were all remote, and my team came out of that and said, and I said, I'm not going to be in these conversations. I want you guys to come up. And that their number one recommendation was, we know you love email, but we don't think that's as effective as something like Slack. And I was like, Slack? What's Slack? And they kind of explained it. They had their business case and let's try it. And I was like, fine. And that is our primary mode of communication amongst the team members. Still love email. But, I was like, okay, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Well, it is the number one thing that my team uses to communicate with each other, and it makes them much more efficient. But that's just a small example where bringing ideas. Luminary Live, our on the road experience,
Yeah.
came from the team.
No kidding.
Yeah, they were like, "Hey, we got all these members now outside of the New York that want us to come to their city. What if we tried like a tour and went on the road, well, almost like a band?" And we're like, "Okay." And that's now we started that in 2022, and we've done 25 cities. We'll do another 7 to 8 next year.
Wow. So, in terms of personal development and putting people in roles that they didn't think they could be in, pointing out their strengths that they didn't see in themselves, what does employee retention look like at Luminary? Because it sounds like there's a corollary between what you and your team are doing in terms of developing your team.
So we have a very high retention rate, but I would also say that's not always great. And the reason I say that is I also want people to think bigger about their careers. So let me just give you I'll give you a very brief example. So we had
Please.
one of our first, well, this is way back in 2019. We had a young woman just graduating college, Seton Hall. Her name was Kelsey. Kelsey, if you listen to this, I'm talking about you. And she didn't know what she wanted. She had literally just graduated. And she's like, I just need a job. I'll do part-time at the front desk. We call those community associates in the space. By the end of that year, we had offered a full-time job in our programming team. And she was with us and then kind of, built her the last 6 years. And she left about 2 months ago to take a job at JP Morgan Chase. And it's wonderful to see people doing that. I want people, just like the rest of our team is as much part of the community as our members are. So I want them to be fulfilled. I want to find their own versions of success. So if it's 2 years at Luminary or 6 years at Luminary, whatever that is, I hope they get as much as they can out of it and that they use that to then take their next step. If they end up being here for a much longer time frame, amazing. But I always want them to be challenged and I want them to be fulfilled and I want them to have joy. Maybe not every day, because that's usually not a job, but as much as they possibly can and really enjoy the people that they work with and the work that they do.
Right. And I like the whole aspect of, the people who work for Luminary are equals with the members and vice versa, which is great. And then again, it's about doing good while doing well. It's, creating space, right? At the end of the day, Luminary is creating space. Because I heard another conversation, Kate, that like really struck me between the eyes, is that we've always been in situations, especially when it's a new situation, where we don't think there's room at the table for us to sit. So how do we create that opportunity? How do we create that place for us? And I think by setting the example, again, correct me if I'm wrong, for how, again, the golden rule, how we should treat each other, we're creating space.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's why I remember, again, whatever it was, it was probably like August, September of 2018. We were launching in a few months and my then PR person, I had a freelance marketer and whoever else I had on my team, my head of community, my ops person, were all in my apartment because we didn't have a space yet. They're like, we need a tag or a hashtag. And everyone's writing all these things down. And I just said, how about come sit at our table? And they're like, that's way too long. I'm like, but that's what we're doing. We're making room for everyone to feel welcome, to feel included, like they have a place. It's why we don't have an application process to join Luminary. It's why we've been inclusive of all representation, all genders since we started. And, we've all felt, no matter whether it was that first day of high school or college or just walking into the lunchroom, where you're like, who am I going to sit with? I don't know anybody. I'm not going to be accepted. That's the worst feeling in the world. It's probably one of the worst feelings you have growing up. And it happens when you start a job. It happens all the time. And we just wanted to create a space physically and virtually where you didn't have to feel that.
Yeah. And it's, again, there's no application process. So it's self-selected. So if you try, again, back to the start of our conversation, what's the worst that can happen? If you don't like it, you don't continue. So that is amazing. And I know we're coming up on the hour, Kate. In terms of, for the folks who are interested to learn more about Luminary and its services and what it offers, is the website the best place to go? Is social media? Where should they turn?
Yeah, website, weareluminary.com. It's a call to action, We Are Luminary. And then our Instagram is We Are Luminary as well. On LinkedIn, we're Luminary, but we're identified as a think tank. People don't necessarily know that. Yeah. So those are the best places. And then for me, my best place is LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active.
Okay, excellent. And then before we break, 2026, we're in October. 2026 is around the corner. What's on the roadmap? What can you tell us that you haven't told other people? That's what's planned for the new year when it comes to Luminary.
Right now we just launched a fellowship program with Marshalls. So we're giving away $45,000 grants, a full year of Luminary membership, no strings attached. I would recommend people apply. We just launched a great partnership with Under Armour for college campuses and student athletes. So maybe coming to a campus near you. Stay tuned in 2026. That we're really excited about that. And I would just keep your eye on the cities that we're going to pop up into next year. And the best place to see that is, again, on our website.
Look at that. The Luminary Live the roadshow is coming to a city near you.
Yes,
Excellent.
exactly.
Yes, excellent, excellent. And it's funny when you said Under Armour and you smirked because you're a Maryland grad and Kevin
Yeah.
Plank went to Maryland.
Yeah. I was on campus with Kevin.
Okay, so definitely that hits close to home, which is it's awesome.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
awesome.
We're very excited. And I think, obviously, in particular, women's sports is really, really important. It's like a huge emphasis. I think readying collegiate athletes, in particular women, before they either enter pro or leave the field and into the workforce, we've got to leverage all of what they know as an athlete. And there's so many skills. So that's what we're really excited about.
Got it. Sometimes I think, knowledge transfer is osmosis. It's really not. It's over time. You got to be in the room where it happens, to have these conversations, to go to these events, to absorb this incredible content that you and your team are putting out on a daily, monthly basis. Kate, it's been a pleasure. I think this is one of many conversations that we'll have. And I really do appreciate your time and insights and perspective.
No, thank you so much for having me. And thank you. A shout out to Melissa Wallace from Fierce Foundry for introducing us. She's a great Luminary member and friend. And so this is also how it happens, right? It's the connection after the connection after the connection. And
Yes.
I'm thrilled that we can make it happen. And I didn't cough too much.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent. A W, a win.
A win, a win.
A win.
Exactly, Eric.
A win. Excellent. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Eric.